yeah, let's hop in because I got a lot to say about it.
Say the words.
So as we said, we're talking about American Psycho, which is from 2000, the year 2000. We don't often cover things that far behind. Like early 2000 things were like, wow, this is silly, this is old.
Or
this
they
is
just
so relevant.
So bad, and that didn't happen.
Yeah.
As bad here, yeah.
Like, besides the absurd technology, like the gigantic phones, you could swap at, like, this movie could exist at any time. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of sad, but it's the truth. So American Psycho is about a wealthy New York City investment banking executive, Patrick Bateman, hides his alternate psychopathic ego from his coworkers and friends as he delves deeper into his violent hedonistic fantasies. It's directed by Mary Herron. And it is a brilliantly satirical and comical view at the toxicity of consumerism and masculinity and materialism and just everything. Yeah. There's so many things I could talk about, and I was like, I need to slim this down. But Mary Herron's film is an adaptation of Bret Easton Ellis's controversial novel of the same name and has very similar vibes. It's, I think the only thing where Herron felt she went a little different was the ending, which inspired people to have a different point of view of the story. Yeah. And she's like, oops.
And also just like the lens too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so Christian Bale plays Patrick Bateman, and it is said that he was heavily inspired by the insincerity of Tom Cruise. And while I was looking up images to replicate for our visual viewers, I found this one image and I was like, you can't tell me that's not Tom Cruise. It's like, I'm pretty sure that this is just an image of Tom Cruise. Like, I don't get Tom Cruise fascination. I always feel that he's disingenuous in that way. Like, I don't get it. I don't get him. I don't get his films. None of it. People are like, oh, have you seen us? No. I haven't seen any of the 10 impossible missions he's been on. I don't know.
I think it's because of like the ingenuineness of his emotions sometimes. It's like there's a fascination with just like how you be like this, you know? Mm-hmm. We're just like, I cannot fathom why.
He also has that, like, he has very Bateman qualities to him in that he envisions himself as a very specific human and tries to impose that image on everybody else. Like, he wants to be seen and believed to be a very specific person of power and height, including like the way that they shoot films to make him seem taller, because he's just so insecure in his own like personhood, which could be tied to, you know, just the fact that he's been a celebrity for so long, also his religion, there's a lot of money. Yeah. So it seems very truthful that it would be inspired by Tom Cruise, not even just like insincerity. Like, I think Bateman and Tom Cruise are pretty close. Yeah. Just have different careers.
There's just like chaos about him. That's fascinating, I guess, too.
There's like an unhinged like understanding
of the world. You can't look away from the fire, you know?
Yeah. You're like, what are you doing? Wow. So the film follows Bateman, a successful Wall Street investment banker by day who leads a sinister double life as a sadistic serial killer by night. And as we spend time with the baffling mind of Bateman, we find that beneath his polished exterior lies a deeply disturbed individual who embraces violence as a means of asserting dominance and control. It's his whole thing. Herron is absolutely hilarious, creating the blurred world for Bateman that has him unable to distinguish between his graphic fantasies and his toxic life of wealth and vanity. But she also designs a world of people so engrossed in their own identities and status, they are blind to the violence and harbored thoughts of a psychopath seated across from them. Yeah. Everyone in this movie is a problem. Yes. Besides the one houseless individual that gets murdered and the sex workers. Yeah. Like, everybody else, there's a problem. Even Willem Dafoe.
Because they like facilitate his time and they like consciously and unconsciously just ignore all the red flags. He just seems like a nice guy. You know what I mean?
Be bothered. They couldn't be bothered to pay attention.
Yeah.
You know, they're too busy. They're too busy creating this.
Well, because you can't be yourself. So you have to, everyone's like, no one can see the thing underneath of this. So can't look at anyone else's either.
Yeah. And, you know, as we were saying in the beginning, American Psycho is very much like Fight Club, and that it has some of the most misguided fans in those folks who've missed the point entirely, right?
Yeah.
One day we will cover Fight Club and Chuck Palahniuk, because I do actually really enjoy his work. But I've always wanted to discuss how, like, a story written by a gay man that is an obvious critique on toxic masculinity can be so completely misunderstood, that men go as far as labeling themselves as like Tyler Durden-esque people on dating apps.
Yeah.
Like, that's not an advertisement you want to be making.
Yeah.
He was the same could be said about the people who idolize American Psycho, where men leap entirely over the point and land on "this is my identity now," idolizing the problematic and laughably absurd masculine monster that is Patrick Bateman.
Yeah.
And actually, I saw this like one random interview with Bale where he mentioned it was like uncomfortable for him when fans like were idolizing Bateman, because he's just like, well, why?
Yeah.
Why do you idolize this monstrous idiot? Like, he's so ridiculous. And he was like, I don't think you get it. Which is also really funny that Christian Bale is saying that, because
he's not exactly a pillar of
yeah, he'd be yelling at people you don't need to be doing. Yeah. That's why I was like, I didn't ever think I would like a thing Christian Bale was in either. I did like the mechanics, but anyway.
Yeah.
But for those of us who got the point, like, properly, American Psycho is a brilliant feminist film in some ways, right? Bateman is so excruciatingly pitiful, socially inept, and pathetic. We can roll our eyes alongside the sex workers just doing their job to catch a bag. We can smirk at his exhaustive morning skincare routine, his excessive grooming, and deliberate clothing choices he makes with the intent of convincing us and himself of the very manly man that he is.
Yep.
It's exhausting for all of us involved, including him. And it's an ideology that is harmful even to himself. And we can even go as far as understanding the confusion between him and another coworker, like mistaking him for someone else, because all of these men are the same, and they are all the vice president.
Yeah.
I just can't, like, how do you not know this is a joke?
Yeah.
I don't get
Everyone's president. Everyone gets
we can't all, like, we were watching, I was like, we cannot all be vice president. That's not how that works.
Yeah.
So Patrick Bateman and his Wall Street colleagues are in a constant pursuit of the latest fashion, high-end dining experiences, and status symbols. And each man is void of their own personality, defined only by their status and the items they surround themselves with, which sometimes those items are their pretty blonde women.
Yep.
Right? They are indistinguishable from the next, if not for their specific suit or access to exclusive restaurants, which is, again, this hierarchical thing, right?
Yeah.
The meticulous attention to detail regarding fashion labels, business cards, and even the superior taste in music becomes a reflection of their identities and a way to establish dominance over one another. I'm better than you because I like Huey Lewis in the News. Sidebar, Gabe hates Huey Lewis in the News. I cannot stand them. It's the worst music ever. So I was like, okay, I get it. I know who this guy is. Status is such a crippling obsession to Bateman that all of his decisions are wrapped in the pursuit of elevation, caught in an endless dick measuring contest. That's every day. Yep. That hits what he is. It's exhausting. I get it.
Their dick is also the size of their wallet. So they're like, look at it. Yeah. Look how rich and giant it is.
I am the peak of man. It's like,
exactly.
One of the best scenes in arguably all of cinema is the infamous business card scene. It's a brilliant example of the absurd lengths these characters go to for superiority, the laughably absurd severity of focus on the color, font, and weight of the business card highlights their shallow preoccupation with appearances and the desperate need for validation. It's when that scene came on and they're like, check out this new business card, and it's like everyone was the same except like one was like a different font. Maybe like slightly, like one was like, mine is ivory but mine's eggshell. And I was like, this is like when you're wedding dress shopping. Yeah. You know, and you're very specific about the linens or something. Yeah. Like, I was like, I can't tell the difference, but this I did see that everyone picture. Was. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and everyone's a vice president. I was like, you cannot, what is this company? And they were in mergers and acquisitions, which is just essentially the same as the Severance company.
Yeah.
What is mergers and acquisitions? What is that? What are you doing? Nothing. You're not doing anything.
Yeah.
The film confronts our own obsession with status and the exaggerated portrayal of these wealthy monsters. But do we not see some truth in them? They're exaggerated, sure, but also not.
Yeah.
Like, I can believe there's some men out there who feel very strongly about business cards and their skincare routine. We're left questioning whether consumerism has become the new religion where people worship brands and possessions rather than seeking genuine connections or personal growth and leaving husks of humans in their wake because none of them were an actual person. Through the film's violence, we find an expression of frustration and a release from the pressures of consumer-driven society. Bateman's murderous tendencies, seemingly driven by his dissatisfaction with the world around him, represents a darker consequence of a society that values superficiality above all else. It's a cry for help. And he doesn't even know he's doing that, right? It's hurting him so much that he has to act out in some way to feel relevant.
And it's like fueled by his own like sense of superiority also, like the people he chooses.
Yeah. And it's like it's a confliction of superiority, but also feeling like he is inferior, right? Like he's constantly fighting, like, why don't you know? Like he's so at odds with the rest of the world that's like, who are you? No one even remembers your name. You look like the 7 other men in this room. Yeah. This picture is the same. Yeah. It's the same picture.
He's like, I'm unique.
Yeah, he's like, but I'm Patrick Bateman.
Because I murder, you know?
Yeah.
That's a different thing I do.
Newsflash. You're all murdering the lower class. And you kill houseless populations all the time.
Yep.
Is acting out is the destructive nature of unchecked consumerism, and it shows the lengths to which individuals might go to escape the monotony and hollowness of their lives and identity. And in a twisted way, Bateman's acts of violence become a rebellion against a world that has reduced humanity to mere commodities. And each part of his intricately designed persona and existence is with specific intention to be something he can never actually be. Right? Or like that he believes he already is. He's just trying to convince everyone else to catch up, right? Yeah. And he has left humanity behind and become a commodity himself, unable to connect with other humans in any genuine way. He has separated himself so severely from reality and his own self that he views his life like a film. That's why he's narrating it to us. Like he's so detached from his actions. It's like, oh, look, I'm just watching this beautiful film. He's like all the fans who are stupid about it.
Look at me flex my muscles as I murder things.
Yeah. Checking myself out as I have sex. This is so ridiculous. The relentless pressure to conform to societal expectations of success, power, and dominance leaves no room for vulnerability or emotional expression, which is why I think it also exposes the emotionally stunted nature of toxic masculinity and the toll that it takes on individuals' mental and emotional well-being. In his constant pursuit of being the best and most important person in the room, he has to sacrifice just being a human, just existing in his own emotions and feelings, because there's no room for that in the conference room, right? That's why even the business cards are completely devoid of personality. You can't have one of those. And even in his sexual exploits are influenced by the violent nature of the porn that he watches as he works out. Like even when he's having sex and intercourse, those are all an interpretation of what is supposed to happen. Right? Yeah. He's performing what he has seen happen before. It's not actually an authentic experience for him. It might not even bring him any joy to do those things. It's just, that's what I saw being done. Yeah, and so I'm doing it. Yeah. Yeah. The same thing with like the women that he collects. Everyone wants this kind of woman. I now have that. Yeah. He doesn't care.
So everyone else will like me more because I've achieved this like pillar of what it is to be man.
He like wants nothing. Yeah. He act like his own desires is just non-existence. It just must achieve greatness, right? Must be important. This goes even as far as, like I said, with the women in his life, much like the men, are objects to be used to work towards the perfect life he believes himself deserving of. And he's so obsessed with his own appearance that during the sex scene, he's more captivated by his own body than those he's with. And he also fabricates entire stories, right? He supplants an idea in history with these people he's interacting with. Like, they are even performers in his life.
Yeah.
In each of his interactions with other humans, he is inauthentic and smug, and he imposes his superiority on them by inquiring on their knowledge about arguably completely mundane music, and impresses upon them his own importance and status. But while he, as narrator, insists on his own importance, we are inundated with interactions that paint him as forgettable and dismissed. No one at all around him knows who he is or cares. And so everyone around him may be a tool to him, but to everyone, he's nothing. Yeah. And that's really like the whole point of the film. So I want to get into some explicit spoilers about the film. Like, we know he's a murderer. We know he kills people. We know what's going on. The ending is one that's pretty notorious for being a little vague or being a little surprising, and so I will talk about it because I was confused from my memory of when I first saw it, and then I was watching it this time and I was like, wait, I don't know if that's true, and then I found the answer and I'm really excited about it. So if you haven't seen this film from 2000, go watch it. Super funny. It does have a lot of violence, and that was jarring for some viewers when it first premiered. But I feel like it's so graphic and absurd, like as graphic and absurd as like his personality, that it's like also funny. Like, and some of it's not. Some of it's like, oh my God, that's horrible. But I feel like there's just so much of it that's like, you're like, what? This guy's ridiculous.
Some of the murders are very over the top too. Like, it's not like it's a kind of nonsensical way to murder someone. Like the methods yes, exactly. It seems nonsensical. So like those ones, although very brutal, were like, you're like, how would that even happen? How no one react to this? Like, no one comes out in the hallway and is like, hey, maybe don't do that.
But of course they don't. Of course they don't. No one's looking outside of their lives.
Yep.
You know, and that again, that's the whole point. It's so genius. It's such a great film. So yes, there's violence. You can absolutely like close your eyes to avoid it and get the gist of like, he murdered a bunch of people. But if it's not your cup of tea, you can listen to this spoiler version here to know what happens at the end and what the gist of the story is. And then you did it. Now you know why this is a cult classic and everyone loves it. So let's talk about the end of the film and the through line of his monstrosity. And in the film, Bateman has an upsetting interaction with Jared Leto. I mean, Paul Allen. I was like, it's just like Jared Leto, though. Everyone would want to kill him as well. And Paul Allen confuses him for another man who, in Allen's defense, looks just like him.
Yep.
And further, Bateman explains the mistake is understandable. It happens often. And it's understandable because both of these men do the same job and are essentially the same in every way that counts. They like wear the same kind of suits. They have the same job. They work in the same place. They go to the same places outside of work. Like, he was like, I get it. But also he was insulted. So this exchange, coupled with Allen's superior business card, unleashes a rage in Bateman that has him using Allen's confusion to his disadvantage, or to Bateman's advantage. He invites Allen out to dinner as Halberstrom, who's the guy he thought he was. After many drinks, he brings him back to his apartment that is now covered in plastic sheets and newspaper. But Allen is too intoxicated and so secure in his own status in the world that it doesn't occur to him that he'd be in danger. He's like, why are the funnies on the ground? Why's the sports section over there? He's like, you need to clean up your apartment. No one could want to kill
me. I'm just the white man. The white man. No one wants to harm the white man.
The white man in power. Like, never, it just, like, danger is not a concept.
And if they do, then consequences will happen. And they don't.
Yeah. No one would ever dare to do that because I'm so important. But he's also unimportant. Yeah. So Bateman murders him and works to cover it up. He sneaks into Alan's apartment and leaves a news voicemail message about Alan leaving for London. Totally believable. Also, laughably, it's just his voice. Like, again, they were just so indistinguishable that he could just pretend to be Alan. It's like, everyone's like,
yeah, that's him. Yep, that's his voice. Sure.
Eventually, he begins using Alan's apartment, which is far nicer than his own I guess it looked the same to me, for his other desires, such as murder, sex, and status. So, the ending, as I had first interpreted it, was that Bateman had imagined all of this violence and chaos, that he was so wrapped in his own potential and selfish being that he believed himself to be capable of these horrifying acts. But in reality, he's pathetically simply someone with a great imagination.
Yeah.
And that's like one that most people kind of, or a good number of people lean towards, because it does seem like, because everyone's like, what are you talking about? None of this has happened. All your stuff is erased. And you're like, oh, then maybe it didn't happen. However, thanks to YouTuber Alaric's films and their video American Psycho, A Message on Consumerism, I have found that that is not the case. And this is way more interesting and a testament to what Heron was trying to say, you know, and her genius. So Heron actually mentioned that it was her approach to the end that has inspired these interpretations. She had hoped that the end would be vague and left to interpretation and lean more towards what happened in the book. But because of some of the decisions that the creative decisions she made, people are like, oh, it's all made up. Yeah. She's like, no, dang it. That's not what you're supposed to think, you idiots. I'm sure there's a few things where she's like, how did you guys get there? Yeah. Alaric's films explain the truth of that perplexing ending, and it was very helpful. I do recommend going and checking out that video, because he plays the clips from the film, so you can see like actually what's going on. Yeah. So in the end, after a descent into true madness, Bateman goes on a killing spree, which results in him like shooting up police cars and trying to feed a cat into an ATM machine. It's like, it's clearly insane. Like, you're like, this is made up. Or so, like, this is a break for him, like like a mental snap, because there's no way this is happening. But something has happened where now he finds himself, you know, in his office, taking cover from the helicopters outside, and he calls his lawyer and leaves a message admitting to all the horrors that he's committed. He's like sobbing. He's finally questioning his own sanity, and if he's a good person. He's just like, oh my god, I'm a monster, help me clean it up. It's not really like oops, it's like, I'm gonna keep doing it, right? But after this harrowing night where he's unscathed, nothing bad happens to him, he finds his lawyer at this event, and he is at first mistaken for someone else entirely. Like, the lawyer doesn't even know who he is. He's unforgettable, right? And when he explains, no, I'm Patrick Bateman, he's laughed off for his absurd joke. I was like, oh, you really had me going. And Bateman tries to convey the truth of the matter, but is continually dismissed. You know, they're like, this isn't a joke. Like, why do you keep making this a joke? And the lawyer explains that he'd actually seen Alan recently in London, so he couldn't possibly be dead. And this is an idea that the detective, Willem Dafoe, of the case shared previously. And it's an idea that is heavily influenced by Bateman's message on Alan's phone. So he left that message saying, I'm going to London for a few weeks, and everyone believed it. So then we saw a guy who vaguely looks like Alan in London a few weeks ago. It had to have been him, because no one matters. No one knows who anyone is. So panicked, Bateman runs to Alan's apartment, where he had been storing the gruesome corpses of his victims. It was a murder capital the night before, where it was just splattered blood on the walls. It was just like, it was horrifying. It was like a haunted house of horrors for the last victim running out of there. But when he gets there, the apartment is immaculate. Pristine white walls and a chipper real estate agent are there instead of blood and regret. And we would then be led to believe none of what we've seen has happened, because like everything's cleaned up. So he's clearly insane, right? He thought there's blood everywhere and he was doing murder, but this whole time he didn't even get into the apartment, right? But instead, if we consider that Alan's family was investigating his disappearance and keeping it under wraps, that's what the detective says. Like, oh, his family's concerned, but we're keeping this on the down low. We could understand that perhaps the family discovered the violent aftermath and thought it was committed by Alan. Right? He's very capable because he's terrifying white man with power.
Yeah.
So instead, they would think that his disappearance is a result of him fleeing the scene of the crime, not just going off, right?
Yeah.
So they would then clean up his mistakes and move on like it never happened.
Yeah.
Right. To cover his tracks. So then this leaves even this, the only act that was truly Bateman's, to be erased and rewritten as someone else's. Even his villainy is not his own, as he is condemned to forever be mistaken for someone else, so terribly forgettable and unoriginal that no one will remember his name.
Yep.
And I think it's such a bittersweet, like, ending that was well deserved. So
100%. And it's like I see when you were like, oh no, it just none of it's real. I was like, what do you mean? Of course the white man got away with it. So it's just like really funny to me. I totally agree with that YouTuber. I didn't see the video, but the 100%.
I just remember him sketching the like, I misremember, because doesn't he sketch on like a napkin when he's out at dinner?
With Reese Witherspoon's character.
Yeah, and he's like sketching horrible things. And I was like, okay, clearly this is all in his head because someone would have noticed that. And that's just totally on me thinking that these people are at all aware of the world around them and not in of themselves to be able to notice that. But that's the whole point, was that no one cares so hard that he can do something like that in the restaurant. So
yeah, like they're socialized to ignore all of his like red flag behaviors because, well, Reese Witherspoon's character specifically is benefiting off of their arrangement. Even in her crying when he breaks up with her, she immediately stops crying in very typical white woman fashion, where she's like, all right, that wasn't real. All right, the show's over.
Yeah, I got my attention. I got to be the victim.
Yeah, exactly.
And now I can move on.
Yeah, and she doesn't care who he is or what he's doing.
But now she could just always paint him as the bad guy.
Oh, 100%. And then also, like, she can continue to have sex with that random man that is his friend, in quotations, without any consequence. But now she has to, like, be a single woman, and that's, like, a whole other thing. I don't even know.
Yeah.
But